Could I have your attention, please? Attention, please. Could I have your attention, please? It's time to start. We need to get this on the road because we have an online audience who's tuning in right now. We generally have several hundred listening to this and watching it in their homes. And so for the benefit of those, greetings to all of you. And you will see a comment section and a question section on your screen, which you can use at your discretion. I'm Bill Dempsey. Can you hear me all the way in the back? Oh, too bad for you, good for me. All right. I'm Bill Dempsey, the president of Sycamore Trust, and I'm awfully pleased to see all of you here to welcome you to this annual meeting of our organization. We have always had every year, this I think is the 10th year, it could be the 11th, Father Bill Campbell with us to give us an overview of what's been going on at the university in terms of its Catholic identity, and to give us an invocation. But he's not able to be with us this year. He's at Yale finishing up his work on his sabbatical. He sends you his greetings. He is with us, as he always is, with us and the university in prayer and inspiration. And in his stead, Sophie Bono will deliver his invocation for him and for all of us. You'll hear from Sophie later on in the program. Sophie is a senior this coming year at the university.
Okay. Thank you. This is the invocation that Father Bill Campbell wrote. God our Father, we praise your name and seek your blessing on all the participants in this gathering this morning, and ask your special blessing on the University of Notre Dame. May it live out fully its mission as a Catholic university, operating from the heart of the Church. Guide all of its students, faculty, and staff. Help them to be faithful and courageous in standing strong for religious liberty, in respecting life at every stage, and in defending the weakest ones in our society. Be present with all the alumni who have gathered back on campus for this reunion weekend. Enliven their conversations, deepen their friendships, and give them safe travel when they return to their homes. Give your grace and guidance to each person here so that everyone may be ever more courageous and generous in living out his or her true vocations. Help us to respond boldly in our following of Christ and to be the women and men God calls us to be. And Lord, we ask your blessing on the food, which through your bounty we share here at this breakfast. May it nourish us in your service and strengthen us to do your will in the world and so to extend your kingdom. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Now, just a couple of housekeeping items. You have in front of you a program which is just filled with wonderful information. It has the whole history of our organization, what we think we've done and what we think we can do. And I'm going to assume your promise to read it, and in accordance with that, I will not read it to you this morning. I did have a prepared speech. I read it over. It's not very good. So Pentecost is coming, and I'm just going to rely on the Holy Spirit and rattle on here. We have upstairs on the way out, there's a table with books on it, and Bruce Fingerhut, the president of St. Augustine's Press, is there. I urge you to stop by. He's got a wonderful collection of books there. He does a great service for all of us and for the University of Notre Dame in the work that he does with that press. I want particularly to recommend to you, if you don't have it, Father Campbell's book, For Notre Dame, in which he traces the many things, but among them and importantly, the struggle that went on in the university in respect of, how does the university preserve its Catholic identity? it's a gripping story and one that everyone really ought to know. And then there's Charlie Rice's book, the late and great Charlie Rice, What Happened to Notre Dame, that I commend to you. And in particular, what I have in mind there is the introduction. It's about 23 or 24 pages. It's the best relatively short summary of the change that happened in respect of the Catholic identity of the university over the last several decades. His what's become a famous aphorism of Fred's is that Notre Dame is something like a public school in a Catholic neighborhood, and that really rings true. And if you read what he means by that, you'll get the full substance of it. But these are two of the books that are there that I do urge upon you. There are many others. Then I should say something to you about Sycamore Trust, and maybe I will later on. Right now, let me just say that we've been in existence for about 10 years now, a little bit over. The trigger point was the approval by Father Jenkins of the student production of the Vagina Monologues and the Queer Film Festival. But it didn't take long before we saw that what the root problem here is the deterioration of the Catholic presence on the faculty. And that's true not just of Notre Dame, it's true of all originally religious schools that have lost to a greater or lesser degree their religious identity. It always begins with the gradual loss by the faculty in its roots in the founding religion. That isn't by any means a complete process at the University of Notre Dame, but it's substantially along its way. And that then has its symptoms in things like the Vagina Monologues and the honoring of President Obama and all of the other things that we record regularly in our bulletins. I'm going to leave it go at that, but I do want to give you some opinions of outsiders about Sycamore Trust. We get them regularly. This person said, for example, every time I get an email from you, the Taliban of Notre Dame, I'll try to make a donation to the Gay and Lesbian Alumni Association of the university. Now, I'm trying to work out a commission deal with the Gay and Lesbian group, but they are tough. They're tough bargainers. Now, I particularly like this one. I've read it before. I share it with you again. They are a reactionary, ultra-conservative, anti-intellectual band of older misfits. Imagine a bunch of old white guys with bushy eyebrows furrowed at modern society. That's them. Now, I want to tell you that I am tired of being ashamed of my bushy eyebrows. I used to get a trim every year about this time. So I have researched this issue, and I discovered that this is nothing to be ashamed of. You look under bushy eyebrows in Google, you will find these titles, for example, with lots of entries. 19 eyebrows as famous as the men who own them. The 25 best thick eyebrows in Hollywood and how to get them. The ladies who make us proud to have bushy eyebrows. I like this one. Hot guys with bushy eyebrows. Now, this isn't quite 12 gross features men, women actually find attractive in men. That one. But then, think of the famous people with bushy eyebrows. I mean, who do you think of? Golda Meir, for example, John L. Lewis, Groucho Marx. Huh? Okay. So, now we get other things that are said that are more complimentary. We had a really able fellow, I'm not kidding, in an article recently, and he referred to us as dynamic. I like that one. Dynamic eyebrows I have in mind, for example. And then in an appeal in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, lawyers representing intervening students who were opposing the contraception, the university's position on the contraceptive mandates. See, I'll give you a little background as to what happened here. In October of the year, the mandate was to go into effect on January 1st of that year. In October, the university announced that it was going to comply with the mandate and that all employees would be getting free contraceptives and abortifacients as of January 1st. Then, in December, just before the deadline, Notre Dame decided to change its position entirely, and it filed lawsuit. And in the brief of this group of interveners, the lawyers said they wondered about this change in position. How did that occur? And they suspected it had to do with a group of powerful alumni. That would be us, right? Okay. Now let me tell you the facts, and then you can, it was a powerful group, no doubt, but you can draw your own inferences. Remember, in October, the university said they were going to comply. In December, just before January 1st, they sued and said they were not going to comply. In November, intervening, there was a group of powerful people. It was not our board meeting. It was a meeting of the bishops of the United States in Baltimore that Father Jenkins attended. Now, you can, as I say, draw your inferences as to which powerful group had an influence on the university on that particular decision. But I like the reference, a powerful group of alumni with bushy eyebrows, and with all that goes with that you know about now. Now, I do want to introduce the board members that we have who are here. George Heidkamp is our treasurer, and he's also our class of 52 class president. It's our reunion this year, that great class of 52.
Please impeach me.
George and I, with bushy eyebrows and all, and a lot of people say, you people are too old for this sort of thing, but tradition is a big thing at Notre Dame, and we're a link to the Father Soren era at the university. You don't want to lose that. And then we have Tim Dempsey, our son, who's our executive director, and who really is the heart of the machinery of this organization. The board thought you might, as I've said before, catch a whiff of nepotism there, but I think I've earned every bit of my position. And, but the board really thought they needed somebody to keep a careful eye on me, and so that's another function that we have with Tim. Let's see. Then we have, so that I get, what am I doing here? All right, we have Tim. Is Mike here? Mike Bradley? There he is, back there. Mike is class of 1914. He's completed his master's work in theology. What did I say, 1914? Okay. It says 14, that's all. Could be anything. Well, it's somebody older than we were. Okay. And Catherine Kirsten, who is from the Twin Cities, class of 1973, one of the first women in the University of Notre Dame. She's a noted columnist and author, commentator in the Twin Cities. We're awfully proud to have her on our board. Dr. Susan Shearer, a political science scholar and teacher, is here from South Bend. And I think that's it. Have I missed somebody? No. All right. Now, I should tell you this. These are names that will be familiar to you. We've added just now 2 new members of our board. John Hannon, the class of 1978, who was a top person in the development office at Notre Dame for a number of years, then went off to become head of development at Catholic University and then down to Georgia Tech. And now he's joined us, and we're immensely pleased at that. And Bill Kirk, who was at Notre Dame for some 22 years. He ended his career here as Associate Vice President of Student Affairs. Then he went to Ave Maria to be Vice President and General Counsel, and now he's head of a educational Catholic nonprofit in Kansas City. You'll be hearing more about them as time goes on. I think we have members of the Notre Dame 88 here someplace, do we? Some over there. There we are. Okay, good. I think most of you know who they are, and as long as they come to our annual meetings, I want to recognize them for what they've done and what they stand for. The Notre Dame 88 were 88 people who were arrested for trespass when they demonstrated on the outskirts of the university on the occasion of the honoring of President Obama. The university had them prosecuted, dragged on for 2 years, much to the discredit, in my judgment, of the university. There were people, the images stick of of an elderly priest being carted off by the police with a rosary in his hand. They stood up for the cause of life in a brave and courageous way, and they have earned our everlasting thanks as members of the Notre Dame community, and I want to welcome them here. Now, all right, now we come to our main speaker, Professor Jerry Bradley of the law school. You have his biographical, it's only a partial one, information in the pamphlet that you have in front of you. As I say, it's only a partial list of what he's done. He is one of the most popular teachers in the law. So I should say this, lest I forget it. The university is not a uniform place in terms of its Catholic identity. It all depends on, I say it all, but it largely depends on the composition of the faculty. The law school is a notable exception to what I've said about the attenuation of the Catholic identity of the university. The law school is a robustly Catholic university, and it is a top-grade university. It is, in my judgment, the best of the Catholic universities, better than Georgetown, in my view, and it is certainly a lot more Catholic. It is certainly the most Catholic of the major law schools in the country. So we are very pleased to be able to say that. And Jerry is one of the very best members of that faculty, one of the most popular teachers. He's a leading expert in the country on the intersection of law and public policy and religion. I want to say a word about the Bradley family too, because it's an extraordinarily Notre Dame family. There are 8 children, all of them. The youngest one enters Notre Dame this year. Mike is on our board. Tim is entering the law school this year. Anna is a senior. There are, I don't know, 2 or 3 double domers in that group. Mike and Tim, then Tim, were editors-in-chief of the Rover. And Pam, their wonderful mother, is here with us this morning. It's just a great family, and so I'm so pleased to be able to introduce to you Jerry Bradley.
Well, thank you, Bill, for recognizing my wonderful and beautiful wife. And members of the family, I have to say it's no secret that around Notre Dame I've been here 25 years. So for about 24 and a half years, I've been known as a bit of a right-wing nut and a Taliban Catholic even. But things began to look better for me and got better for me, I think, when my kids began going to college here. And I kid you not, that Jenny Bradley, the oldest, started college in the year 2000. And within months of her arrival on campus, I would walk past some, not enemy, but someone who was wary of me on campus, let's say another faculty member. And then they would kind of look at me funny and then stop and they'd say, you're Jenny Bradley's dad. You're not so bad after all. And then I had the same experience repeated as the other kids came along to school. So I'm very grateful in that special way for the fact that my children have come to Notre Dame. It has rehabilitated my reputation around here, at least as much as it can be. Now, when Bill Dempsey asked me to speak about Trump's election and how it would affect Notre Dame and the American church, he'd been president for just a month. I mean, Trump had been in office for about 30 days. Bill has been Sycamore's president for life ever since he arm wrestled George Heitkamp for the job back in 2006. Now, I was honored to be asked, I was also sobered by Bill's assigned topic. Trump had no track record as a political leader. He ran more as an economic populist than as a social conservative or a friend of religion. I think, though, that as we reflect more about what happened last November, we'll learn that the working class voters in flyover country who put Trump in office were moved by economic anxieties, yes, for sure, but perhaps just as much by an abiding commitment to God and to country, really an old-fashioned patriotism. And this fact about these people in flyover country came to my mind recently when Pam, my wife, was talking out loud about reading J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. Now, Trump is no hillbilly, and it takes one to know one. I grew up in Brooklyn. Trump is a New Yorker down to his socks. But I think we're learning that Trump is, and in some important ways, an old-fashioned patriot too. But I really stopped fretting about what I would say this morning in early April when the Irish Rover published the commencement speech Donald Trump would have delivered 2 weeks ago in a soggy Notre Dame stadium. Now, one Mordecai Lewis provided a copy of the Trump commencement speech to the Rover. And if you haven't already done so, you should read the whole thing. I'm sure it's available online, and it's just a blast. I'm going to share with you just a couple of excerpts from Trump's commencement speech. Now, like most people, the president had a plan to make Notre Dame football great again. Now, this is Trump speaking, right? You have to stop the run. It's that simple. I will build a great wall. Our defensive line will be a great wall. And USC is going to pay for that wall. And it's going to be a great wall that will stop anyone from going through it. Now, President Trump then observed about Notre Dame more broadly. Again, Trump, Notre Dame has fallen on hard times ever since Sergeant Tim McCarthy from the Indiana State Police retired. Notre Dame has been weak. I remember what Tim McCarthy said. What a great guy, by the way, a real American. He said, driving like a turkey is a foul way to drive. And he's right, you know. The truth is that Notre Dame has been driving like a turkey for a while now. Well, now you know why Mike Pence got the invitation. Now, I'm pleased to report that exclusively for use at this Sycamore breakfast, Mordecai shared with me a section of President Trump's commencement speech that was deleted at the request of unnamed high Notre Dame administrators. Now, the deleted remarks, I should tell you, were about Bill Dempsey. Now, again, according to President Trump, Dempsey's a fantastic guy, really, and such a beautiful wife. You know, he's kind of old now, but he's not low energy like all those senators in Congress. A lot of people don't like Dempsey because he criticizes Notre Dame. Well, I guess they don't like me either. What a bunch of turkeys. Now, I was going to ask Dempsey who to nominate for the Supreme Court, but someone, I can't remember who it was, told me that Dempsey clerked for a liberal chief justice. What's his name? Earl Berger or something. But the Russians didn't tell me that, though. I mean, Putin doesn't even know Bill Dempsey. So I asked Dempsey anyway, and he mentioned a Notre Dame law professor, Bradley. I looked him up. He's a conservative nut, a real whack job. Jared said that nobody has been to the right of Bradley since Benito Mussolini died. Trump. Who the hell was Mussolini? I once had a barber named Ciccolini, but now I do my own hair. Now, one way to talk about Trump and the Church in Notre Dame is to compare his policies, his proposals, to Catholic social teaching. But I thought about that approach for quite a while now, and I think I couldn't do that very well in the half hour Bill Dempsey has allotted to me. So we all have a choice to make, and I'll be guided by your preferences. We could ask Bill if we could have the room until about 11:30. Or I could take a shortcut. Okay, I see we'll take the shortcut. The shortcut is to say something about just 3 important social issues and then talk about religious liberty and Notre Dame. So that's what I propose to do. First, abortion, which has been and will be the great human rights issue of our age. Donald Trump has already shown himself to be a stout defender of our tiniest brothers and sisters. This commitment on Trump's part is shown by his reinstatement and then expansion of the Mexico City policy, his willingness to defund Planned Parenthood, and more. Its pattern is virtually certain to continue. Now, the president has not shown similar good judgment about another huge social issue, the defense of marriage and the family based on it. I would like to think that Trump's reticence is due to the influence of his daughter and son-in-law, who, notwithstanding their observant Judaism, seem to be standard issue Manhattan liberals on these issues. But I feel that the president himself does not really get it on marriage and sexuality. I suspect that the best we can hope for from him, from his administration, is more rather than less religious protections against this revolutionary and oppressive force. Third, and if you feel like you're about to enter the twilight zone as I turn to the issue of transgenderism, well, I can assure you only that I am not Rod Serling. But they really have made, as we used to say, at least when I was a kid, a federal case out of a 14-year-old girl who does not just feel like she's a boy or doesn't just want to present as a boy. She insists, and her lawyers asserted all the way up to the Supreme Court, that she really is a boy. But this troubled teen is no more really a boy than an anorexic is really fat. Like the anorexic, she is simply out of touch with reality. And people who care about her, I think, should help her get back in touch with reality rather than try to reconfigure the entire world around her to confirm her in her delusion. Now, you know the basic political and legal story here: bathroom wars, boycotts of North Carolina for requiring people to use the bathroom of their sex. The Obama administration helped fuel all of this by issuing 2 legal opinion letters, one from the Department of Education and the other from the Justice Department, making educational institutions which were receiving federal funds, and that would include Notre Dame, treat people as male or female according to what or which they say they are and not what they really are. But then a funny thing happened on the way to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump was inaugurated, and his administration rescinded those letters. And the Supreme Court kicked the case about which I've been speaking back downstairs to the Fourth Circuit, headquartered in Richmond, and there the case remains for a kind of second go at it, but this time to be decided by the judges without reference to, without reliance upon the Obama administration letter rulings or letter opinions. So Notre Dame was relieved of great legal pressure to buy into what my friend and client, the renowned Johns Hopkins psychiatrist Paul McHugh, calls a craze or a fad. But it's not clear to me whether Notre Dame will seize the opportunity provided to Notre Dame, at least for the time being by Trump, to prefer reality about gender and sex to delusion. Now, Father Jenkins took the pages of the Wall Street Journal last September 25th, where he objected He objected to the Atlantic Coast Conference decision to move some championship games out of North Carolina because of its bathroom law. But in that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, unfortunately, Father John did not say that the ACC's decision, in short, to boycott North Carolina, was itself the wrong response to what had happened in North Carolina. He had what the lawyers in the room will recognize as more of a constitutional objection. Father John thought that it was not really the business of an athletic association to be making a decision of that sort on behalf of the member schools. And Father John's judgment was, certainly correct as far as it goes, that it was a matter for legislators, perhaps, but also for the member schools to decide for themselves. Yet, to this minute, as far as I have been able to ascertain, Notre Dame has not squarely denied several news reports that I've seen that the member schools of the ACC voted unanimously to boycott North Carolina. Now, the closest Father John came in the Journal op-ed to defending the truth of the matter was, I think, these two sentences. Now, this is Father John writing in the Wall Street Journal last fall. Some citizens may wonder about the implications of substituting gender identity for biological sex in public restrooms. It is important to also take into account the feelings of those who might be uncomfortable undressing in front of a member of the opposite biological sex. Now, for saying this, Father Jenkins was bitterly criticized in a letter to the Observer, the second-rate campus newspaper, the inferior to the Rover, but admittedly more popular. There was a letter to the Observer signed by 47 faculty and staff, including quite a few supervisors across the campus, program directors and chairs, that kind of thing. And he criticized Father John for being too timid. They said that Father Jenkins was, and this is in the letter in the Observer, privileging the rights and feelings of cisgender and heterosexual people. They compared the North Carolina bathroom law to Jim Crow, that is, to legally enforced racial segregation, and they vowed not to remain quiet in the face of such discriminatory remarks. Now, you can read more about this sad story in the Sycamore Bulletin of November 19th of last year. And that would be 2016, not 1916, Bill. And we should pray that Notre Dame has the courage and the vision to withstand this sort of uninformed ideological criticism, so that that Notre Dame has that courage, really. Someday, I would expect very soon, when a Notre Dame transgendered student demands to be treated according to his or her imagined sex. Now here I'd like to pause to congratulate Father John Jenkins for refusing to declare Notre Dame a sanctuary campus, which he did earlier this spring. No doubt the church, indeed every person of goodwill, should respond compassionately to everyone, legal or illegal, alien or not, to everyone in need of food, shelter, clothing, and care. Consider the Good Samaritan. But the corporal works of mercy, that's not what the sanctuary movement or the sanctuary status is really about. It's really a bit spongy and vague what exactly sanctuary status or being a sanctuary campus means. And maybe it's just more a declaration of a militant stance on the issue of immigration policy than a defined position. But of course, that's one good reason not to jump on the sanctuary bandwagon. You don't know really what you're associating yourself with. But declaring Notre Dame a sanctuary campus would likely have committed Notre Dame to not only opposition to the government, that is Trump's policies on immigration, but to some kind of refusal to give legally required cooperation to federal authorities, especially immigration authorities. And that Notre Dame should not do and didn't do. Now, I don't know what, if any, difference the Trump administration's unequivocal hostility to the sanctuary movement played in Father John's decision. Maybe none. But I do figure that Father John consulted university lawyers, and they would have told him that as a recipient of federal funds, Notre Dame would have been the firing line of any penalties imposed upon sanctuary campuses by the United States. Okay, 3 social issues: abortion, marriage and the family, transgenderism. Now on to the most important thing, any president can do to help the Catholic Church and help Notre Dame, which is this: to create and maintain the legal space needed for Catholics and Catholic institutions to live lives of moral integrity and faithful witness to the truth. Again, that's the most important thing: to create and maintain the legal space needed for Catholics and Catholic institutions to live lives of moral integrity and faithful witness to the truth. We're talking about religious liberty. And it really is the pearl of great price, the essential thing that the Church of Notre Dame need, in fact, should demand of the law and those who make it. Now, to appreciate this point that I'm trying to make about the pearl of great price, you have to evict from your mind the way many people in our pluralistic society think of religious liberty and would think of what I'm saying now, as if Catholics are an interest group in our pluralistic society and the church is basically a political lobby, and that we have a political agenda and we just want to win the political game and get what we want from the administration. But religious liberty for us is not like that. It's about fulfilling the church's divine mission. As the world's bishops said at Vatican II, in Dignitatis Humanae, which is the Declaration on Religious Liberty, this is the bishops talking at Vatican Council, among the things that concern the good of the church, this certainly is preeminent: that the church should enjoy that full measure of freedom which her care for the salvation of men requires. This certainly is preeminent, the freedom of the church. But religious freedom is also about here and now, about the welfare, the good of temporal society. A free and faithful church is the surest guarantor that there is on earth of peace and the maintenance of the true common good. The church is ever the foe of injustice. If the church is free, or where the church is free, there's a body of people in that society who adhere to an authority higher than the state and who are called by their Lord and Savior to redeem the created order to make it truly just. Simply put, the best thing the church can do for our society, for any society, is to be the church. The best thing that Catholics can do is to be Catholic. And the best thing any public official can do is to help those two things to happen. Now, by this crucial measure, Donald Trump has already done much good and is poised, I think, to do a lot more. On May 4th, he was photographed outside the White House with some members, some little sisters of the poor, assuring them, and this is Trump speaking, that their long ordeal would soon be over. It is hard to imagine Hillary Clinton doing that. Now, that day, Trump issued an executive order on religious liberty. This is May 4th. Now, that initiative was, to some, myself included, a disappointment for stopping well short of simply exempting religious employers like Notre Dame from the HHS contraception mandate, about which Bill spoke briefly earlier. And the order issued on May 4th did not address at all the oppression which the Supreme Court's creation of a right to same-sex marriage has visited or initiated or caused upon so many people, especially but not only wedding vendors. So I was critical of the order issued on May 4th as simply not good enough. Now, others, including Cardinal Wuerl, for example, I wouldn't say praised it, but at least recommended it as a useful first step. And I was really dubious of that. But he was right and I was wrong, because earlier this week, the administration leaked a draft regulation which does the right thing on the HHS contraception mandate. Repeat, it does the right thing. Now, it's not yet law. It's not even yet an interim rule, you might say. But the administration seems ready to make it law, and it provides a very broad exemption from the HHS mandate. This is exactly what Notre Dame and scores of other religious plaintiffs have been demanding for the last 3 years in court. And Trump is to be applauded for this. But be careful what you wish for, I suppose. Trump chose to do the right thing, but I wonder, in fact, I even doubt that Notre Dame will. I expect that Notre Dame will continue to facilitate access to contraceptives pretty much along the lines that it does so now, according to what, and you don't need to worry about what the legal term of art means, but according to what's now called an accommodation, even though in its lawsuit, the Notre Dame says it's not possible for a faithful Catholic institution to do that. But I do, unfortunately, expect that Notre Dame will not seize the opportunity to exempt itself entirely from the mandate, but will leave itself entangled in an accommodation, and I think that would be wrong. In fact, more important, I hope I'm wrong in this prediction. Now, we happen to live in a society where religious liberty is, to a significant extent, a matter left up to the courts. Often under the First Amendment, sometimes under provisions in state constitutions that look and sound like the First Amendment, or under a state or federal law, there's a statute, such as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But the broad terms in these laws, and even in constitutional provisions, leave judges a great deal of room to maneuver. The laws are indeterminate, or the language is broad enough to leave a fair amount of discretion or room for judgment to the judges. There's a lot of space where a judge possessed of a sound understanding of the relevant realities will do great good, but a judge possessed, animated by, captured by an unsound ideology can do a great deal of harm. So I'm talking about a judge's understanding, which the judge can't read off from the law, but rather comes from the judge's understanding of the culture and the history of this country, really of reality, of what religion is, how valuable religion is to persons and their well-being and to social well-being, and today, most critically, what is the meaning of equality and non-discrimination when it comes to matters of sexuality? Way too often, liberal judges have substituted their ideological biases for the law when all of these things come together in a court case. Now, Donald Trump has not and will not be nominating judges like that. I think Trump's judiciary will be his most valuable legacy to us, and it's a legacy that will pay dividends for decades. Now, no public official can make anyone or any institution seize the opportunity the law affords to be a faithful witness to the truth. No public official should really try to make anyone or any place like Notre Dame really be faithful. Being faithful happens when a person or a people or a group choose to be steadfast in the faith. Now, it's been the great good work of Sycamore over these last 10, 11 years to respectfully but firmly call Notre Dame to that fidelity, to call upon Notre Dame to stand tall for the truth of Catholicism. Now, the great temptation or potential pitfall with Catholic groups which try to do something like what Sycamore is trying to do is to be too old-fashioned, to be nostalgic, to perhaps confuse traditions that everybody or they cherish for the truth. But Notre Dame doesn't have to be the way it was 50, or in Bill and George's case, 65 years ago when they graduated from college. It doesn't have to be like we remember it. It doesn't even have to be traditional in some ways, and it doesn't have to be conservative. What it needs to be is orthodox, or that's maybe a kind of backwoods way of saying Notre Dame just needs to be Catholic. That's all it needs to do. And I think Sycamore, despite the antiquity of its leading figures, seems to me to have navigated this pitfall, this shoal, really very successfully. I don't think that Sycamore is confusing tradition and nostalgia, the way things were, for the truth. And I think that's a marvelous and important accomplishment. And I congratulate Bill, George, and the others who are principals of the group for doing just that. I've been here long enough. I just got flowers for being here 25 years. It could have been worse. My paycheck should have started bouncing. They could have changed the lock on my door, but they didn't, and I got flowers. But I've been here long enough to have memories of the old Notre Dame. And the pull of memory is indeed strong. I feel it around Notre Dame myself. And I didn't go to college here and never laid eyes on the campus in person until I interviewed for a job here about 26 years ago. Now, cherishing the place we come to know when we were much younger and full of hope and full of plans is perfectly natural and even good. I have those feelings about Notre Dame. I remember when I first came to Notre Dame and reunion weekend rolled around, that the way the people who worked here, myself included, talked about the alums, and that would be you, coming back. Some people referred very affectionately and warmly to the plaid pants crowd. And others not so much. They would refer to the plaid pants crowd, but it wasn't. Now, honestly, anybody other than George wearing plaid pants today? No, right? So things have changed. Some things change. Now, Pam and I have a family friend who recently took a driving vacation in California, and she was very frustrated by the traffic and the roads. And Linda came back and said, well, you know, in California, they just have two seasons, winter and construction. At Notre Dame, we now have one season. But I think my introduction, and maybe my most memorable little vignette concerning nostalgia for the old Notre Dame came, and this itself is nostalgic, when I was walking with Ralph McInerney, probably within the year or so of my arrival in '92, and Ralph and I had gone to the 11:30 Mass at the Basilica. Ralph, many of you, well, all of you must know who Ralph was, and some of you surely knew him better than I did, but I am proud to say I became a friend. Anyway, I ran into him at Mass, and he was sitting in the back, and I swear Ralph turned off his hearing aid whenever the homily began. I can't prove it, but I think he did. But he switched it back on. He said, let's go to the legendary Oak Room for lunch. Remember the Oak Room in the South Dining Hall? It was like a cafeteria. So I said, well, sure, that's okay, Ralph. So we walked from the Basilica. You can imagine the route we would have taken, say in '93, past the old bookstore, which is now Coleman Morris, right? And we're going across the quad, and probably about halfway across the quad, and this was maybe in April, so the weather was nice and it was bright. Ralph kind of turns and he's looking in the direction of the Rock, the Rockney Gym, and he's got a kind of funny look, and there's no tear. I mean, I imagine there were tears in his eyes, but there weren't. But he's kind of visualizing something. I said, well, what is it, Ralph? He said, well, I remember, it must have been in the early 70s, Ralph said, when I was walking across the quad just like I am now, and there came these streakers, a bunch of streakers. Now, you know what streakers are? Okay, got it. So Ralph says, well, and they came right in front of me, and then they went up into the dining hall, and then they came back out, and they just I just can't get that image out of my mind, Ralph says. Okay. I mean, maybe we'll go back and someone could hear your confession, Ralph. Is that where this is going? But I listened to the story, and I said, I kind of mustered up some words. I said, so Ralph, were these like boy streakers, or were these like girl streakers? A pause. Ralph says, I don't know. They were all wearing bags over their heads. And that's old Notre Dame for you. Well, somewhat more seriously, as I conclude, it does seem to me that this is the season of crisis and renewal laments among faithful Catholics. I have in mind, just for example, recent very good books by Rusty Reno, who is the editor of First Things. A book by Anthony Esselin, a truly gifted teacher and scholar, has just decided to move from Providence College over to Thomas More College, and books by Rod Dreher, and finally by Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia. Now, perhaps the titles of just these last two that I've mentioned will convey, or illustrate at least, the thought that I now am trying to communicate. Dreher's book is called The Benedict Option, A Strategy for Christians in a Post-Christian Nation. And Archbishop's book is Strangers in a Strange Land. Now, I agree with these authors that American culture's fall from grace is going to continue apace for the foreseeable future, even if the rate of descent slows down during the Trump years. Notwithstanding the safe harbors that the Trump administration is providing to Notre Dame and the church, the challenges to Notre Dame's Catholic identity actually are only going to grow stronger, not weaker, in the coming years. And that's because those challenges, in my opinion, arise chiefly, very largely, from something Trump can do little about, which is the dramatic and still accelerating secularist drift in the academy, that is in the university world. And Trump can do nothing about something else that's a source of the challenge to Notre Dame's Catholic identity, which is Notre Dame's determination to be a great global research university. Now, in the time I have, I'm just going to indicate or offer two illustrations of what I mean about the challenges that arise from the determination to be a great global university. One is that in my 25 years here, I have seen an explosion in the use of the phrase. Well, that is what our peer schools are doing. I mean, at faculty meetings and discussions that aren't just faculty meetings, but people who are important at Notre Dame take that as a debate stopper. It's the decisive criterion, more often than not, as an undeniable truth about operating as a great global university. That's what our peer schools are doing. But the list of peer schools includes no Catholic university, although Georgetown's usually on it. And the Atlantic Coast Conference includes no Catholic universities, besides ours. Second illustration, up to a handful of years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have sworn that I would retire from this university without ever hearing the phrase, the Notre Dame brand, as anything but a punchline to an unfunny joke, or in a conversation about T-shirts. Well, I am still here, and I am not talking about T-shirts, and it's commonplace to hear the phrase promoting or protecting the brand pronounced as a rule of decision or a decisive consideration in some, even many, decision-making contexts. Now, it's interesting that the term is used by people, even important people, as a deciding factor, but I think there's even some embarrassment when they use it. I mean, we're not quite past the point or entirely without irony when we talk about, we're protecting the brand. We're a bit embarrassed by it, but it is what we do. And I'm not talking about T-shirts. Now, since 2007, Notre Dame has produced short commercial spots for broadcast during the football games, right? You've seen them. Morally earnest Notre Dame faculty or student is doing some exciting good deed, working in a progressive cause, sometimes, often, but not always, exhibiting a spiritual motive for doing so. Is this part of Notre Dame's brand? Is this Notre Dame's brand? Doing what other universities do, only being morally earnest and spiritual about it? Well, the commercial I want to see does not feature someone at Notre Dame. It is about Notre Dame. It does not ask, what would you fight for? Instead, it asks, what would Notre Dame risk the brand for? Now, all of this is truly perilous. If I had to describe the beam in Notre Dame's eye in a paragraph, in about 30 words or so, I think I would put it this way. Notre Dame really cares about its Catholic identity, but Notre Dame wants Catholic identity cheap, at little or no cost to its overriding goal of being a great global 21st century research university. The problem is Catholic identity is not available cheap, and the price is going to go up, not down. Now, it seems to me a nearly heroic devotion to the truth will be needed to keep Notre Dame on track. But heroes are in short supply. Even the thought of aspiring that status seems a bit stiff-necked and even pharisaical. So let us pray that those who care for Notre Dame, most especially those endowed with the authority to shape its future, be humble servants of the truth. And that is all they, or any of us, should ever try to be.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for that wonderful talk. I don't really think that Trump said that about me.
Well, it may have been a poor translation from the New Yorkese.
Yes, right, from the Russian, right. Just a couple of comments that what you said brings to my mind. This question of globalization and research university. There's another book that I would like to call to your attention. It's by a really prominent national scholar, sociologist at Notre Dame, Dr. Christian Smith. I think I have the name of it here, yes. Building Catholic Higher Education, Unofficial Reflections from the University of Notre Dame. And he examines this question of whether Notre Dame, if it continues on its breakneck course to become a top-ranked research university, can remain or be a fine liberal arts university and a Catholic one. And his conclusion, and I think I quote him directly, is that there's hardly any chance that that can be done. Now, he doesn't recommend, of course, abandoning the goal of becoming a top-ranked research university. What he recommends and says is essential is that this process be slowed down and that priority be given, much more priority be given to strengthening the Catholic identity of the university, by which he means, as we all do who look at this situation with care, the faculty. I mean, that's the key to the whole thing. And why do we say at Sycamore, well, we think that the Catholic identity of the university has deteriorated. What do we know? Who am I to judge, just to make up a phrase? And we aren't. What we do is to look at what the university itself says is the test of its Catholic identity and its mission. And this is the outcome of this debate within the university that Father Campbell traces in this book. The outcome of that was the establishment of a test, in effect, for Catholic identity of the university, and that is that, and I quote directly, the Catholic identity of the University of Notre Dame depends upon, not just a nice thing to have, it depends upon the continuing presence of a predominant number of Catholic intellectuals on the faculty. Everyone agrees that predominant number means a majority. As a matter of fact, Father Malloy, the author, said it means more than a mere majority, but forget that. It means at least a majority. Now, what kind of Catholics? Well, they can't just be named Catholics, check the box Catholics, I say I'm Catholic. They have to be Catholics dedicated to something, to the Catholic Church, to the Catholic faith. The bishops, in their phrasing of this same test, speak of Catholics dedicated to the witness of the faith. Now, the nominal percentage at the university is somewhat, a little bit over 50%. It's a lot higher in the law school, as I mentioned. And the law school meets that test. The university does not. There is no one in the university, no one who would maintain that there is a majority of the faculty in the university that are dedicated or committed or whatever other adjective you want to use, Catholics. It is far short of that. What does that mean? It means that the university. Now, what it doesn't mean is that there's nothing Catholic about this. This is a great university, and it's a great Catholic university in so many ways. There is a remaining core of Catholic scholars that's being replenished year by year. There are some wonderful recent hires, and there are year by year of Catholic scholars to this university. And it means that a student here can get, if he or she wants a Catholic education, can get the best that there's available. and they do. But for the majority and the people who don't seek that in a deliberate way, the odds are not very good. And the hazard is in the future. You know, what lies ahead? That's what we look at. Now, I rattle on without being tethered to a text. I apologize for it. Now, let us turn to our last speaker, Sophie Bono, one of our 2 awardees this year. Nicole O'Leary is not with us because she is in Rome on an internship that's funded by the Center for Ethics and Culture at the university. It's one of the really wonderful institutes at the university that, you know, feeds the intellectual life and the cultural life, Catholic life of this university, has ever since its institution by Dr. David Solomon, who's here. Oh, incidentally, David Solomon, we have enrolled, I haven't told him this, as honorary board members in order to increase the average bushiness of our eyebrows. I think it was Jerry Bradley who referred to David's eyebrows as of biblical proportions. And that's part of our Catholic mission. Sophie Bono is a senior this coming year. As I say, Nicole O'Leary is not with us. And you have Sophie's biography there in front of you. She was a wonderful editor-in-chief of that wonderful publication, The Irish Rover. And if you don't subscribe to it, you know, when you go home, you know, look on the internet, go to their website and do. It's a courageous, independent publication. I should mention that it's an independent publication. You can do it. It is its own 501c3, so you can donate to it directly, and it reports on all sorts of things about the university in depth and with particular attention to what bears upon the Catholic identity of this university, the good and the bad. I think it was, yes, I had a note here that I did want to read because it's not included in your biography. And Professor Walter Nagorski drew this to my attention. Sophie received the Professor Edward J. Cronin Award for the finest piece of writing in the PLS program during the academic year 2016 and 17. That's a special prize. Nominations for that paper, for that prize, are made by the individual professors in PLS, and then an outside faculty committee chooses the winning paper. We have made a. I should mention this too. Sophie's high school was Oakcrest, outside of Washington. It's a wonderful girls' high school. And a couple of years ago, our awardee was another graduate of that high school, Alexander DeSantis, again, a managing director, I think, or executive director of the Rover, a absolutely brilliant writer, and it's a testimony to the importance of high schools like that, Catholic high schools, and it reminds us of the great work that Father Tim Scully and his people do in the ACE program at the University of Notre Dame in strengthening that really terribly important link in Catholic education. So Sophie, one second. We have our prize in terms of a contribution has gone to the Irish Rover on the one hand, and to the Militia of the Immaculata, of which Nicole O'Leary is president. And I have for you, Sophie, this lovely vase, which has etched on it my picture.
Thank you so much. It's a great picture on the vase. So first of all, I want to thank from the bottom of my heart Sycamore Trust, and in particular Mr. Dempsey, for this award. It really means a lot. I would also like to thank and congratulate Nicole O'Leary, my co-recipient, for her amazing work on The Rover as writer and as campus editor and managing editor, and her great leadership in the Mission Immaculata, and her wonderful friendship. And I'm only sad that she can't be here, but she is very deserving of the award as well. And thank you, all of you, for being here this morning, and to all of those who are watching the live stream. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you all. When I first came to Notre Dame, I was dragging my feet. It was Ash Wednesday of 2014, my senior year of high school. And when I realized that my dizziness and stomachache were not merely symptoms of fasting, my desire to visit the distant South Bend campus significantly dropped. But after the rallying encouragement of my mother, I found myself half asleep at Reagan National Airport, then in a rental car being driven in a daze through Chicago, and finally to the warmly lit stoop of the Morris Inn at 1:30 in the morning. From that moment on, we were greeted with friendly smiles and assistance from everyone we met. At the tour the next morning, thinly attended on a cold day in March, we had our tour guide all to ourselves, and she cheerfully guided us all around campus. I rapidly fell in love. When I received my acceptance letter a few weeks later, I committed in a heartbeat. I returned to South Bend in August with a spring in my step. All the same, I never could have guessed what awaited me here at the University of Notre Dame. Immense personal growth, daring endeavors, and a beautiful mixture of painful and joyful experiences of love. Looking back upon my 3 years here so far, I'm so grateful for the treasures I have found here. I have a chapel with the Blessed Sacrament and Mass at my fingertips, a vibrant dorm community around me, a thrilling sense of unity with my fellow students at football games, and of course, a number of wonderful friends. Let me elaborate on that last one. I often tell people that my favorite part about Notre Dame is the range of personal connections I have made here. I have formed close bonds with people who share my core values. These friends have sustained and strengthened who I am. At the same time, I have formed equally genuine friendships with people from a variety of backgrounds and with different beliefs. We have bonded through other things, a shared interest, a common value, or even just our love for Notre Dame. Because of the treasures I have received here, throughout all the ups and downs that life has brought me, I have never once doubted that this is the place I am meant to be. Still, I have also learned more deeply that Notre Dame, like any place on earth, is no haven of perfection. Not all my friendships have lasted, not every football game has been pleasant, and not every university action has strongly adhered to the faith at the heart of its mission. Here's an example. During my freshman year, all new students had to attend 3 sessions called Building Community the Notre Dame Way. The second of these sessions focused on preventing discrimination based on sexuality, sexual orientation, and other related qualities. The presentation emphasized the university's commitment to charity and inclusion, noble and beautiful qualities, no doubt. However, what struck me about the videos we were shown was that they defined and described a list of terms such as bisexual, lesbian, and transgender as if they were normal. To my recollection, at no point were we told that the Catholic Church understands acts of homosexuality and the transgender ideology to be disordered, nor were we told that according to the Church, sex belongs within marriage. This gave me pause. If we, as a Catholic university, could uphold a commitment to charity and inclusion, why could we not also uphold a commitment to proclaiming church teaching? Why could we not say, we love you and include you to anyone and everyone, but also say, this is what we believe human love is, though you may or may not agree with it? At that moment, I felt that my university had missed an opportunity. I knew how beautiful the church's teaching about sexuality is, precisely because it embraces human nature and purpose with the truth. It seemed as if we were hiding that teaching in order to avoid offending people, even though we already require 2 theology courses. Building Community the Notre Dame Way is no longer the program the university uses to welcome first-year students to campus, but I have been told that the replacement Moreau First-Year Experience course can be similar. From this experience early in my Notre Dame career, I encountered some other students who were also dissatisfied with the program. Many of them have become some of my closest friends, and many of them got involved, as I did, with the Irish Rover. We were committed to the same values and committed to Notre Dame. Writing and editing for the Rover has helped me not only pay more attention to the culture and actions of my university, but also has given me the skills and the nerve to write about them. I have covered controversial lectures on campus, commented on student reactions to the presidential election, and shared my thoughts about phrases such as pro-woman. For my last Rover editorial, entitled The Heart of the Rover, I wrote about my experience in a psychology class I was taking. We discussed many controversial topics, including the nature of humans versus animals, in vitro fertilization, and transgenderism. The class consistently held a climate of free and open discussion, but at the same time, a clarification of the Catholic perspective on these issues was largely absent. As I wrote in the editorial, I do not discredit the professor or the knowledge I gained in the course. However, I felt the need to point out that, as in every classroom on campus, a crucifix hangs on the wall. Students come to Notre Dame knowing that it is a Catholic university, and therefore, the university has not only the right, but also the duty to present the truths of the Church. That presentation need not override charity, openness, and a love for freedom. In fact, that is what the Church is all about. With every gift, revelation, and assistance God has given us, He has always allowed the freedom to choose or to reject His offer. That freedom does not devalue the gift. Rather, it helps us appreciate the gift far more. So when it comes to the classroom, a fulfilled Catholic mission does not demand that every subject suddenly be turned into a theology course, nor even that every single professor be Catholic. It does mean that every professor must understand, adhere to, and transmit the fundamental mission of our university with full freedom and through their field of study. This is why a majority of committed Catholic faculty is so important. And even more importantly, the administration must lead the institution to understand and live the mission more deeply. It is difficult. I do not doubt the noble efforts, goodness, and wisdom of our foundation and our leadership. I simply wish to note, as a student, what can and must be strengthened at this great university. The liturgical hymn captures the idea, Ubi caritas est vera Deus ibi est. Where charity is true, there God is. The use of the word true, I think, is not only meant to describe a charity that is sincere, but also one that adheres to the truth. Only then can God really dwell in us, and only then is the Catholic mission fully alive. I also wrote upon this subject after the presidential election in my editorial, The Search for True Dialogue. I noted that many students had excluded and even been hostile to those who disagreed with their own political convictions. It is true that many sensitive issues were at hand, but at the same time, I am convinced that without a joint effort to listen to and engage with each other, even those with whom we vehemently disagree, we will advance neither towards charity nor truth. The other day, I saw an article in the Washington Post about some 8th grade students who refused to take a picture with Speaker of the House Paul Ryan after meeting him outside the Capitol building. The reason they gave, according to the article, was that they disagreed with Mr. Ryan's policies. The author of this article called their actions civil disobedience. This scenario, I think, has become all too familiar, not only on campus at our own commencement this year, but also throughout our modern society. Excluding the unpopular opinion is seen as an act of heroic resistance and justice. These kinds of protests may be permissible, yet again, freedom is precious. But they're limiting, not freeing. And to me, they're tragic. My best friendships were born through conversation. We learn about each other, our similarities and differences, and we come to understand, appreciate, and help each other. Whatever one's beliefs may be, a pursuit of truth, love, and joy simply cannot proceed without personal connections. Both sides must be willing to hear both sides. The beauty of a Catholic university is that when it comes to matters of faith and morals, it need not be left guessing what the answer is, since it bears the truth. Through my encounters with many different friends here at Notre Dame, I have learned more about how to share with them the truth I hold dear to my heart. I must listen to everything my friends have to say with full attention and full affection, and I must absorb the truth and goodness embedded within their words. That way, I learn. And then I must gently share what I believe, with charity, within friendship, but with absolute clarity. This is my mission as a Catholic and our mission as a Catholic university. I love Notre Dame because I have encountered friends who know me deeply and love me deeply. Some agree with what they know I value, and some don't. But that does not stop our friendships. On the contrary, these are friends I enjoy, learn from, and try to help in any way that I can. I try to share myself without compromising myself or the truth. I would walk with any friend of mine to the edge of a cliff, but not a step beyond. I thank Notre Dame for helping me build these kinds of friendships. I really can't wait to see where they take me and what else I will discover in my final year. Finally, I hope and pray that these kinds of friendships can permeate this university, and beyond that, our culture. Only then can we transform the world from within into a place of resounding truth and true love. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. And that reminds me to say something else. It isn't just the faculty. There's somebody else in those classrooms. It isn't just the faculty that makes the university Catholic or not Catholic. It's the students. It's students like Sophie, and there are many of them here. And that's one thing that I should mention. The University of Notre Dame has maintained a quota, if that's what you want to call it, or a goal of admitting 85% students who are Catholic. And they pretty much do that. Now, that's not easy these days. There's pressure on that because the pressure is to increase the average SAT, admissions examination scores of the university, because it's so important in terms of where the U.S. News and World Report ranking puts Notre Dame. So there's pressure on, but they've resisted that. That doesn't mean that 85% are committed Catholics on their way to the priesthood or to the sisterhood, but it does mean that a large number of them come from the kind of Catholic families that Sophie comes from, and that so many others come from, who do so much to strengthen the Catholic character of this university. The student organizations here, like the Irish Rover, the Right to Life Club, the Identity Project, the Edith Stein Conference, the Militia of the Immaculata, they're wonderful organizations, and keep them in mind always as you mark and designate your contributions to the university. Now, we have a few minutes. We'll take some questions if we have any. And let me say this, that if you have questions and you don't ask them here, or we run out of time here, as we will in a few minutes, send them in. I guarantee you that if they're for Professor Bradley or Sophie or me or anyone, I will see that they're answered. And Sophie is going to be upstairs with Bruce Fingerhut's table, at his table up there, and we'll be happy to talk with you about anything that you might wish to discuss with her. Now, Right here, yes. Marion.
I totally agree that the central issue is having a Catholic faculty. But when I think about this, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel because the faculty pick the new faculty. Essentially, when there's an opening, there's an appointment promotion committee that forms that chooses narrows it down to 3 people. And often, those people aren't that interested in the Catholic identity. They would like Notre Dame to be more like the peer institutions, like the, aren't Catholic themselves. So I don't see how this will ever change.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested if anybody can enlighten me about how the way forward would be in getting a more Catholic.
Yeah. The question is, and it's a really good one, if you couldn't hear it in some parts of the room, how does the university ever get out of this? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Because who picks the faculty? The faculty picks and that's right. They replace themselves. The selection of faculty, the staffing of the university is devolved to the faculty. That is absolutely true. And so the question is, well, what's the solution? I think, if they put me in charge, that would take care of it. But here, the deterioration of the Catholic representation of the faculty has stopped. It was headed spiraling right down. It was going to go nominally below that 50%, and it has stopped. Now, what's happened? The university can set a hiring goal at the top. It has done that, and then the chairs and the heads of the colleges are appointed by the president of the university. He should be appointing people who pay attention in the guidance of the faculty in their departments and their colleges to the goals that are set by the administration. The goal now has been reduced in arts and letters, I'm sorry to say. It's now 50%. Well, what does that do? That guarantees no better than the status quo, but it probably does guarantee that at least as long as we started publishing. These figures were never available publicly. We started publishing them right away as soon as we saw the mission statement and the data. And now everybody knows whether or not the university is adhering to its goal, which at least nominally meets its test. And I'm convinced myself, just based on the last 10 years, that at least that much will continue. That is to say that the percentage of nominal Catholics, and therefore of real Catholics at a lower level, can be maintained. The question really, in my mind, is, well, now how do you improve on this? Because what you have to do, really, to restore the university to an authentically, fully Catholic university is to improve, and that's got to be done we can't expect miracles here, over a long period of time. And the obvious answer to that is you get an administration and people in governance who will gradually raise that standard, not to some 90%. We're not looking for anything like that. This is a modern university. We can't be expecting, as Jerry said, a restoration of the old days, but a gradual restoration and strengthening of the Catholic identity. And I think that is achievable. Whether it will be done, in my mind, depends entirely on those in governance. And that's, I think, where the answer is. One way or another, it's going to go. Back there?
The question, what do you think that one of the problems may be accepting federal money in terms of keeping our Catholic identity? Once you accept the federal money, you accept the federal laws and everything else that goes along with that.
Well, Jerry, you have any?
Well, no doubt that's a standing, not temptation, but a standing liability that with federal funds come some strings. Famously, there are at least 2 smaller liberal arts colleges that I can think of. They would be Hillsdale and Grove City, which are free of federal entanglements because they don't rely upon federal funds at all. I'd say 2 things, maybe more directly in response to the question. One, it's impossible to imagine a research university that wasn't involved in a decisive way with federal funding. I think my impression, at least, is in the sciences and engineering and maybe some other areas of research, you're just not in business unless you're dealing with federal contracts and federal research grants. So I don't recommend that Notre Dame try to find a way to live without federal funds. I don't recommend that, and I believe that it's also federal funding in the relevant sense of it if the students are taking federally guaranteed loans, right? That's not really in the picture. So I think it puts a premium on two things. One is doing more rather than less to make sure that whatever the federal government does by way of attaching strings be done in a sensible way and with great respect for religious liberty. And there's some play there. Electing Trump is better than electing Hillary Clinton on that score, and by a great margin, frankly. And second, I do think that it's not inevitable in the sense that there's a necessary or logical relationship between federal funds and being asked to do something that's morally impossible. But as a matter of fact, it's quite possible that some federal funding will have come attached to it a string that is simply has to be refused. That is to say, the string is morally impossible. And then the answer is no. I mean, the answer is simply no. I mean, no one and no institution can or should ever do something that's morally impossible. So that's the last thing. In the end, the answer can be no. Come and get us. Come and come padlock the doors, come put us out of business, because the answer is no. And if that stream of federal funding is withdrawn, then so be it.
Right there.
Is there any way that we could have the university get back to have the board of trustees back to the direction of the Holy Cross Fathers more so than a laity board? Would that change it?
The question is there any way for the Holy Cross Order, in effect, to get back control of the university?
I can't see that. I don't know how that could happen. I just don't know how that could happen. Nor would I recommend it. I wouldn't think that's the solution to the problem. We were talking a bit at dinner last night about more or less Holy Cross being the way forward if you want to increase Catholic identity. And I don't mean in the slightest to be reflecting a judgment about the quality of the Holy Cross Indiana province at all, but in the end, I don't think that's the way to go. This part is just simply my own opinion. My observation is that there's, the identity and self-understanding of the institution may be centrally its aspiration to be a great global research university, and maybe fudging some moral questions of the Catholic identity as we pursue that goal. Let's put it that way. I think that's the source of the problem. My guess would be any Holy Cross fathers who ascended in the pecking order sufficiently to be in positions of influence would probably buy into that vision for Notre Dame. So I think it's, not to make it sound tawdry, but the corporate identity, I think, is the problem. And you'd have to figure whether in Roman collars or not, anybody who comes to run the place would probably have bought into that basic vision. And I think that's the problem in my judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of federal funding, the big decision of Trump's this week was no global warming. So there will be a stream of, universities justifying yes global warming, and that's a big issue regarding religion too, because that's heading toward no borders, one world order. So his stifling that has been a biggie, I think, even for religious liberty. And regarding the ND88, excuse me, Norma McCorvey was one of those arrested, and she just passed away. She was responsible for Roe v. Wade, but she came to conversion, even joined the Catholic Church. And there was Ellen Keyes, and you mentioned the priest. And then 11 of the 12 voted to give Obama honors, 6 of which were Holy Cross priests. The only one that voted against Obama orders was a Democrat, an economics adjunct professor, Gorski, I think was his name. And I find that ironic. 6 priests said yes to Obama at the awards. I mean, he's president, but he was awarded honors, and one said no. So, and what's lovely, I'm sorry to be so chatty, but Melania is a Catholic. Won't she humanize Trump by her Catholicism? I just wanted that.
Yeah.
That she would have
We'll see.
revealed a Catholic, not now, I mean, not during the
Right.
Might have been a stretch, yes.
Yeah.
But how and where has she
Mhm.
sure
Yeah.
that she's decided to become Catholic after she married?
Yeah. We'll say a word about the votes, but about the control of the university. It really is, I mean, people may not understand this, but effective control has been with the Holy Cross Order. That's the way it was set up. Ultimate control of the university is in the hands of 12 fellows. 6 of them are members of the order, and so it has half of the controlling body plus the presidency, and in any kind of other kind of an organization, that's effective control. So when you look to, so that's why I really agree with what Jerry has said. I mean, this trend has been one that the order has fully shared in, at least in the membership that has been in control, in governance. We'll have one more right here.
Bill, can you comment on the distribution of Catholic professors between, say, a technical college like engineering versus, say, the law school?
No.
Because it seems to me if they're improving it in the technical side, it would be so important as improving
Yeah.
it in the non-technical side.
Yeah.
Because, well, having taken those courses in engineering, I couldn't tell you necessarily whether my prof was a Catholic or not.
Right.
Or many times it shines through when we get a little bit off on something so non-technical. But anyway, can you comment on that?
Yeah, the question is, can we tell you anything about the distribution of Catholic faculty among the different departments and colleges? There's a recommendation here for Catholic calculus, for example, or something of that sort. We could, up until the university closed off that information. It's an interesting story, freedom of information and transparency at the University of Notre Dame. They used to publish something called a fact book. It was a wonderful book. It had all kinds of figures and data about the university, intensely interesting. It had been published for 25 years or so. We discovered it, and then we began publishing the data, which gave us not departments. You had to kind of sense that. But colleges. So we knew science, we knew law, we knew arts and letters, we knew engineering, all right, and architecture. They shut that off. They had enough of that after 3 or 4 years. And so now all that we can get, and we have a hard time getting that, they won't give it to me anymore. I have to get somebody else to ask for it. The overall data. But I can tell you this, as of 4 years ago, 5 years ago, science was a relative wasteland. As I recall, don't hold me to this, but it's roughly right. About 35% nominally were Catholic faculty in science. Engineering, arts and letters was about average. It was about 52%, 53% average for the university. Engineering was about the same. Architecture was about the same. So that whole area, law was much better. Business was about 63 or 4, and it had been that way for a long time, pretty good. Law was above that, maybe 80%, something like that. I'm assuming that things have held about the same, but I can't be sure of that. I just don't know, because they won't tell us anymore. But it's an important question. Now, I think, well, we'll take one more, way back there.
Jerry, could you give a little local insight on how the university would have arrived at the Laetorio Award last year, knowing it would conflict with the church's teaching on politicians having a personal life and then a representative life?
Well, I just said, I actually can't, I don't have any, what you might call inside knowledge about how the decision was made last year. You're talking about Boehner and Biden.
Biden and Boehner, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard what seemed to be reliable rumors, which I wouldn't repeat in a public group like this. But I honestly don't know. There is a committee of faculty and perhaps 1 or 2 staff, a smallish committee that's in charge of vetting recommendations and maybe making recommendations to Father John. But I'm not even sure if it's in the end Father John's decision alone or whether he consults with the fellows. I honestly couldn't say. So,
And I brought the question, say, was it generally accepted on campus?
I think
Or do
generally,
other alumni groups also say, hey, I don't understand how Notre Dame can do that?
I think it was generally accepted on campus. I mean, if for no other reason than generally speaking, people are apathetic. They're just busy with what they're doing. They regard it as what the administration does.
It was apathy then.
Yeah, I think it was generally accepted, or at least acquiesced in. And I think it was it was a bad choice. I'll say, speaking for myself, it seemed to me that neither was deserving of the award. So Notre Dame invented this new calculus. So you take 0 plus 0, and you get 2 out of that. Giving to 2 undeserving politicians of different parties somehow makes for at least one proper Latari Medal Award. And that just strikes me as not the way to go.
Really, I think we need to clear out so that people can get to their. I want to leave you with this. Let's not be unhappy. Well, be unhappy, sure, and be dissatisfied, but not feel any sense of hopelessness about this. I'm reminded in the barber of the president story that I think I've told here once before. I hope not to this group, but it has this kind of moral to it. It's a story of a sour barber and Luigi, his client. Luigi came to this doer fellow one day for his haircut, and he said, Joe, he said, a wonderful thing has happened. I've retired, we've saved enough money, and we're going to the old country. We haven't been there for. And he said, when are you going? And he said, well, in a couple of weeks. Oh, he said, don't go then. The weather is terrible. It's rainy and cold. He said, no, he said, Rosie, we just have to go. She just has to get to the old country. He said, oh, well, he said, no, how are you going to get there? And he said, we're going to fly. He said, what airline? He said, well, Air Italia. Oh, he said, don't fly that. He said, that's a death trap. They drop into the Atlantic all the time. He said, well, no, we've got our tickets. And he said, well, all right. He said, well, where are you going to stay? He said, we're going to stay at the New Hilton. He said, he said, it's a cockroach trap. He said, I went, terrible place. I know, I've heard my clients. He said, well, look, we've got everything set. We've got to go. He said, well, what are you going to do when you get there? He said, we're going to see the forum. But he said, but we're going to see the Pope. He said, you see the Pope. A general audience? Well, yeah, sure, we're not important. Yeah, he said, stay in your room and watch it on television. You'll never see the Pope. You'll be way down there. He said, he said, we've got to go. So he went and he came back, and the barber said, well, how'd it go? And Luigi said, he said, you won't believe it. He said, the weather was crisp and cool. He said, it was beautiful. The sun was out all the time. He said, he said, the airline smooth, just on time all the time. He said, well, the hotel. He said, he said, they treated us like kings and queens. There was an empty suite. They gave it to us. He said, you see the Pope? I said, yeah. He said, you won't believe this. He said, we were down there. We were in the front row. And the Pope came down, and he greeted every one of us. And he said, he said, what do you say to you? He said, my son, that is the worst haircut. So be a Luigi and not a barber. And God bless you all, and God bless Notre Dame, and thanks for coming.